Okay, the draft has passed. We gave you our top 50 big board before the draft actually happened. Now we're going to revisit that with our updated look at it with landing spots, undrafted free agents, all of that kind of stuff. Stick with us. This is our 51st and final NFL draft profile video for the 2019 season right here on dynastyleaguefootball.com.
The NFL Draft Profile Series, NFL Prospects, break it down, let's get it. People's pen and the gridiron scholar, time to do it major. Let's see who running the field, let's analyze the data. Yeah, let's go.
As I mentioned, hopefully you've been with us for the whole lot of the series we've done. We've covered over 60 prospects in total, 45 individually. Then we rounded out each position and did the remaining guys. We did a top 50 big board where John and I each did our own individual top 50 ranks. Then we combined the two to come up with our consensus, kind of, I don't want to say weigh each other down, but kind of keep each other in check a little, if you will. If one of us is too high or too low on a player, hopefully we balance each other out. So the two of us together, giving you our thoughts and our wisdom, if you will, and coming up with this top 50 combined big board. So now that we have the draft completed and the landing spots on drafted free agents, everything of that nature, there were definitely a bunch of surprises, a lot of draft Twitter, if you will, got a lot of picks wrong. I think we were pretty good with our overall boards, John. There definitely were some players that you'd only be able to classify saying we missed on. I mean, obviously, I've been driving the Kelvin Harmon bandwagon for a while. He was a player we saw slip. Hakeem Butler was another guy that people fell in love with and saw slip. But before we get into this top 50 list, was there one or two big surprises for you in particular?
Well, my biggest one is obviously I was very bullish on James Williams, the running back out of Washington State. He wasn't even drafted. But ironically, I thought he landed in a great landing spot in Kansas City. But you do have a very crowded backfield considering they spent draft capital on Darwin Thompson also. Look, James Williams is a player I'm going to be watching closely. He could easily be on the practice squad or a training camp cut. And he's a player that I'm going to watch over the next 2 or 3 years because I still believe that he can play in the NFL. But for whatever reason, no NFL franchise thought that his skill set would benefit their system at this point. So I guess that was one of the most shocking ones. I would say the other one that really shocked me, and I just finished writing him in my post-draft preview for Football Diehards, and that's McCole Hardman. I'm sure we're going to talk about him a lot. He was outside my top 20. You know, in my model, he did not pop. He did not pop on film. Of course, I understand it's a rushing attack at the University of Georgia, so you have to take the numbers, a little bit less seriously because he's not going to put up that 100-catch season in the Bulldogs offense. But, I thought Riley Ridley was better than McCole Hardman, but the Chiefs thought Hardman was better, so I have to listen to what the Chiefs are telling us, Andy.
Well, we're going to get into McCole Hardman very soon because he's in both of our top 10 now. And just squeaked in, and that was definitely probably one of the bigger surprises for me as well. But at the top of the list, we have, again, this is a unanimous choice. So he's my number one. He was your number two. Collectively, he became both of our number ones, and that's Josh Jacobs. Lands in Oakland, first significant offensive pick for the new regime with Mike Mayock calling the shots in Oakland. And he was not our number one entering, but now he becomes our number one. Are you happy with this? What's your take with the landing spot? We saw Isaiah Crowell is going to be out for the season now. They've talked about Doug Martin's coming back. They've opened the phone lines with Marshawn Lynch again. I mean, to me, this all just sounds like more and more and more carries for Josh Jacobs when we start rehashing some of these older names. What's your take with Josh Jacobs? And is he by far the number one running back now? Has he elevated himself based on this landing spot?
The Oakland backfield is not the four horsemen of Notre Dame in 1924 here. The veterans are Jalen Richard, DeAndre Washington, and right now, Doug Martin, because you had mentioned Isaiah Crowell has been lost for the season. Josh Jacobs is definitely now clearly in the conversation. He's our number one combined big board. You have to feel as if a minimum of 200 touches are there for him between passing and running. So I love him here. It's just a matter of how many receptions and how many touchdowns he scores. But right now, Josh Jacobs is clearly the number one running back in the Raiders' backfield.
And keep him with the running backs. I have him at 4. You have him at 1 overall. David Montgomery was your number 1 overall player at post-draft. And I'm curious, and I want to hear a little bit more on that because not that I dislike him. Obviously, the Bears trade Jordan Howard opened up that spot for him. But I'd have to think that Tariq Cohen is going to be more prominently featured. David Montgomery is kind of a do-it-all guy himself, a bigger body, more of a traditional 3-down back than you think Tariq Cohen could be. So is there enough of a timeshare for him to have significant value, not just in Dynasty, but in redraft as well, as soon as 2019?
I like David Montgomery as a landing spot a ton. Now, I was pretty bullish on him. I had him as my pre-draft number 3 ranked running back. I really liked his tape at Iowa State. I liked his production, and he's a 3-down back. And I started to do some research, Andy. Coach Matt Nagy would prefer to have a bell cow in the backfield. You go back to 2017 when he inserted rookie Kareem Hunt into the lineup, and Hunt led the whole NFL in yards rushing, and he caught 53 passes. Last year, Matt Nagy had Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen. He had to bring Tariq Cohen into the game on passing downs because Howard is not an effective pass catcher. I believe that David Montgomery is going to get about 65 to 70% of the snaps. He'll easily replicate what Jordan Howard did. I think he's just as good of a runner, and he's a much better pass catcher with 71 receptions for the Cyclones. So I love this landing spot for David Montgomery in Chicago.
Both of our number one overall player and still our number one wide receiver, N'Keal Harry, winds up in maybe the best situation possible with Tom Brady and all these vacated targets that Rob Gronkowski leaves. And, I don't think anybody could argue with N'Keal Harry as the number one wide receiver in this class at this point. Miles Sanders, another top running back. We had him pretty high. He drops to 3 for us as far as the running backs go, but kind of a murky situation in Philly. You'd think with the draft capital invested, they're going to give him the lion's share of the carries, but there are still some competitions for reps in that backfield. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Paris Campbell, another receiver. I was bigger on than you, I believe, but now landing in Indianapolis, shoots off draft boards. Kyler Murray, first quarterback. We have him pretty high. Again, if this is a super flex or a 2-quarterback league, you're going to have to bump Murray up even higher. I'd say as high as maybe top 3 overall in this class, just because of the potential difference he can make, not to mention the weapons that they've added for him in Arizona. We'll touch on those in a moment. But DK Metcalf, I want to ask you about him real quick. Not that you have him far at 10th overall. I bumped him up to 6th overall. You and I both were not very high on DK Metcalf leading up to the whole draft, but slips a little in the real-world draft as we predicted, but lands in a very favorable position. And I think with the whole news of Doug Baldwin maybe having to be forced into retirement, I think this just shoots up DK Metcalf's value even more for me. So are people that were maybe drafting before the real-world NFL draft in Dynasty Leagues, are they suddenly feeling a little bit better about maybe the draft capital they put into DK Metcalf for fantasy leagues?
This is a great landing spot for DK Metcalf. I mean, for Dynasty owners, and both you and I were a little low on him. I had him as my number 4 ranked pre-draft, and I worry about short area burst and his ability to separate early in the routes or run quick routes. But you know what? That doesn't matter in Seattle. This man's landing, coached by Pete Carroll, and his quarterback is Russell Wilson. You can't ask for much better. Maybe Paris Campbell in Indianapolis is the only receiver who landed in a better situation. But DK Metcalf is going to be a monster here when the play breaks down and Russell Wilson is scrambling in the backfield. DK Metcalf will probably have a fly route code. If you see Russell scrambling, go deep, young man, because one-on-one, 35 yards down the field, it is going to be very difficult for defensive backs to slow this man down, and Russell Wilson will get him the football. Now, I think he has a ceiling, because I don't think he's a 1,200-yard receiver, but I think he's a very solid 900 to 1,000 yards a season on like 55 passes. So I love this landing spot. I bumped him a lot. You're a little higher on me, but I totally understand why you like him there, Andy. I just have him at the top 10.
All valid points. I know Gary Jennings being there as well has some people worried that maybe he's going to become the deep threat, but I think he kind of replicates what they already have in Ty Lockett. So I think Metcalf offers something that Russell Wilson seemed to thrive on in the past with having a larger wide receiver. He hasn't done poorly with larger wide receivers. So I think you get the largest of them in DK Metcalf plus the speed. I think it adds an intrigue of a weapon that he hasn't had to work with before. So I think there's some untapped potential and upside there. We'll have to see how it all pans out, though. T.J. Hawkinson, our number 1 tight end, lands at 8. All right, let's get back to Mecole Hardman, because you talk about Paris Campbell landing in maybe the best situation for the wide receivers. I don't understand how Mecole Hardman can't make that same claim. He gets Pat Mahomes, who is everybody's QB1 for the next decade now. He gets to hopefully take that Tyreek Hill role. Well, that's at least what everybody's predicting with Tyreek Hill's off-field legal troubles coming to light now. You know, Lance Zierlein had Hardman listed as a Tyreek Hill light comp before the draft even happened, and then this is exactly what's taking shape now. I got to tell you, and going back and looking at Hardman, I know the speed's there. You know, he entered as a DB. He's a return specialist, so he's got the toughness. He's got the playmaking ability after the catch. When he's making receptions. He's got really nice, smooth hands. He just plucks the ball out of the air, but he doesn't always make the contested catch. And I think he's still got a lot of room to learn and grasp to really take over the position. But this is a guy still learning the position. So I think it was a little bit of a reach for the Chiefs, but there is unlimited potential upside with this guy. The other thing I noticed in going back and watching him against some more, I like Radley Ridley a lot more than other people do. I alluded to the Georgia wide receiver core being kind of like Ohio State's and to a lesser degree like the Alabama running backs, where there's just so much talent in that group. The other thing I noticed, though, is I don't think Jake Fromm is developing nearly as well as we wanted to believe he would. So I don't think the quarterback play was terrific for Georgia, and I think that hurt a guy like Mecole Hardman a little bit when you go back and you look at his cut-ups. But, John, you touched on Hardman before. Is he a guy that you're spending and investing a top 10 pick on, or is it just too murky of a situation for you to feel any confidence in?
So I had to go back and watch Mecole Hardman in more detail on film because my model does rely a lot on age, on production in college, and then obviously watching film. And Georgia wide receivers are always going to give me a problem and a challenge as an evaluator because they're not going to pop on that production and on the early dominator age. But I went back, look, he's 5'10", 187 pounds. He's clearly a blazer running a 4.33. He doesn't have a full route tree on his resume. It's very limited. Georgia is not running the most sophisticated route tree and passing game in college football. Needless to say, superior running game, offensive line, running backs, unbelievable. But the wide receivers don't have that advantage stepping into the NFL. But, all four of our receivers we have in the top 10, Andy, they landed in perfect spots. N'Keal Harry with Tom Brady, Paris Campbell with Andrew Luck, DK Metcalf with Russell Wilson, Mecole Hardman with Patrick Mahomes. But the reason why I'm a little lower on Hardman than the other three is I just don't see him being as good as an all-around athlete as the other three wide receivers are as far as a pass catcher. Look, there's 137 targets that Tyreek Hill had last year, so those are now available. But I don't think Mecole Hardman is good enough yet at this stage in his career just to step into that role. And I think people are getting a little bit excited that he's going to be Tyreek Hill. He's not that good of a prospect, and I don't think he's that good of a receiver. Hey, I feel really good. He's a late first-round pick. Our combined board has him number 9. If you told me you got him at 9, 10, 11, and 12, I'd feel like that was a great pick. I think that's where the value is. I've got to follow draft capital, and the Chiefs liked him, so I have to be open-minded about what he's worth in dynasty leagues.
I totally agree, and so much so that we were way off on him and not predicting this kind of thing, that we didn't choose to do an individual profile on him. Again, we did 45 of these, and we chose the guys we thought were guaranteed to be drafted. So for us to omit Mecole Hardman and then see him land where he did was really not only a surprise to us, but a lot of people, a lot of draftniks, people that follow the draft. So I think at the end of the first round, it's a safe enough area to make that investment in, and a guy that could potentially become a wide receiver 1 in a fantasy league. But I think of all the people in the first round, he also has the potential for the biggest bust as well. So it is a buyer beware kind of situation with this. And like John said, don't just think he's a plug and play Tyreek Hill replacement just because of the speed and the size and everything like that. You can see the names on the list here as we continue to go through: Deebo Samuel, Marquise Brown, Darrell Henderson at 12, A.J. Brown at 13, Noah Fant. The next situation I wanted to get into with you, though, was Hakeem Butler and Andy Isabella. They actually tied. The aggregate for them was 16.5, so that was 15th and 16th in our list here. I listed Hakeem Butler ahead just to kind of, stake my claim for the guy that I feel like has the better upside. But this has been a hot topic of debate because the draft capital world is saying Andy Isabella, the team chose who they think is the better player. But I don't think that necessarily always has everything to do with it. So I think Hakeem Butler being there still and slipping on the board, I think Arizona going in and taking him, I think it proves that they did have interest in him. Just maybe they thought Isabella fit what they needed more at the time. That doesn't mean that he's going to have more targets or a bigger share of that offense. My question that I posed on Twitter, and John, I'm going to pose it to you. You're Kyler Murray. You have one pass to throw. You got Hakeem Butler out there and Andy Isabella. Who's the guy that you're just closing your eyes and winging it to?
Oh, there's no question you're going to wing it to Hakeem Butler. I mean, just as far as physicality and size, Hakeem Butler is going to match up much better against the vast majority of defensive backs in the NFL. But, having studied Cliff Kingsbury's system at Texas Tech, because, Andy, I love college fantasy football. I do a lot with it. Andy Isabella matches their scheme. Very similar to what McCole Hardman, obviously Andy Reid in the scouting department identified as McCole Hardman as the skills that they're looking for in that deep threat. I believe that Cliff Kingsbury and that scouting department, they were looking for a slot receiver who was versatile in his route tree, who could attack the defense vertically. If you haven't watched Texas Tech a lot, and I've watched them a ton from one of the times long before Patrick Mahomes was the quarterback, they like to attack the defense vertically on every route that they run. They're going to have at least one receiver running deep. But what is unique about it is they're going to do it from the slot, they're going to do it from the X, the Y, anywhere on the field. What makes Andy Isabella really interesting, you could put him in the slot. If you have a mismatch, you can run him deep down the seam, and you can put him out wide. So I think what they said is this is a chess piece in Cliff Kingsbury's offense, so they spent the draft capital on him. What I kind of wonder what happened with Akeem Butler. I think they almost were surprised that he lasted, right? The Cardinals had the first pick on the third day of the draft, and they're probably looking at the available players, and they're like, hey, look at everyone. The highest player we have left on our board is Akeem Butler. It's not a position of need per se, but he's so much better than everyone else that we have graded, and we know we're going to need 6 receivers active. Remember, Texas Tech, in college, you could have 8 receivers, 9 receivers active because you have such large rosters. In the NFL, you're limited, but he's going to have 6 receivers active every week, and that gives Akeem Butler a very interesting role immediately because no 4 receivers can run vertical routes, 28 minutes a game in the NFL. You're going to have to rotate. So I think they saw value, and they just said, we got to go with Akeem Butler here, Andy. I like it. Hey, I look at it this way now, Andy. If you want to roll the dice, high ceiling, low floor, you go for Akeem Butler. If you want a nice return on investment with a high floor, low ceiling, you go Andy Isabella. I think it depends on how your dynasty roster and your philosophy in these drafts are, who you would take first.
One other thing I'd like to point out is that, when we did individual profiles on both of these, so you can go back and watch those for our extended thoughts. But Isabella is not really dynamic after the catch. Sure, he's got the speed and he can beat you deep, and sure, he makes tough catches over the middle and has pretty good hands to hold on to him. But that's pretty much it. He catches it and he's going down. Whereas Akeem Butler was one of the kings of the class with the yak. So I think that's certainly something to pay attention to going forward to the next level as well. John, one or the other, you got to pick one. Who's it going to be between Butler and Isabella? Who are you taking for your fantasy teams?
Well, I'm always going right on my draft board. I'm going to go right to it. I'm taking Andy Isabella. Right now, I have him ranked at number 15 and Akeem Butler at 21. So I'm going to take Andy Isabella.
All right. Well, there's some disparity for you right there. Keeping along here. Devin Singletary, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Dwayne Haskins comes in at our number 2 QB at 19. Terry McLaurin, I'm a little bit bigger on than you, but I think he lands in a nice situation, gets to stay with his college teammate in Dwayne Haskins, moving to the nation's capital. You got Irv Smith going and hopefully taking the reins from Kyle Rudolph in Minnesota. I wanted to ask you, number 22 on our list. I had him at 29. You have him at 16, which is pretty high for me. Deontay Johnson finds himself in Pittsburgh. We know Antonio Brown has moved on, but I think people are forgetting that they took James Washington in last year's class, who was a very dynamic receiver in his own right. I think James Washington, to me, is a little bit better of a player than Deontay Johnson. Not that Johnson doesn't have a role, but I think I see him as more of that third wide receiver in the offense than James Washington. So Deontay Johnson, what's his upside to you, and why are you so big on him?
So first, you have to understand, Deontay Johnson had a great 2017 season at Toledo. Now, what happened is the Toledo quarterback graduated. So they had very poor quarterback production last year. And Deontay Johnson definitely did not perform as well as the year before. Now, I liked him a little bit, but he was in that, 18 to 22 range as a prospect. But when the Pittsburgh Steelers identify a wide receiver that they like, they have been very good over the last 6 or 7 years. They've made some mistakes, but more often than not, they've been correct. That when they identify a player to bring into their system, they like the skills of that player, and then they coach them up. And I like that Deontay Johnson is on a team that he does not have to be relied upon immediately. He can be a player who is schemed around early in his career coming out of the MAC until he masters all the skills required. When you have a team with Juju Smith-Schuster, you identify James Washington, you have James Conner, and that good offensive line with the Hall of Fame quarterback. I'll take the upside in a dynasty league 3 years down the road that Deontay Johnson is a really good PPR monster in Pittsburgh.
That would be a tremendous upside for the Toledo product. continuing to move on this list. Miles Boykin winds up in Baltimore, potentially opposite of Marquise Brown, giving the Ravens a potential duo that we haven't seen in quite some time for that offense. Damian Harris, a running back I've been big on, lands in probably an unfavorable situation, but as I talked about in his profile, he's used to being in a committee. So I think you pair him with Sony Michel, and that team wants to be more run-heavy, at least from what we saw during the playoffs. I think that's actually a better landing spot than you might originally or initially think of when you look at where Damian Harris has landed. Kelvin Harmon, we got into way too much, so hopefully he can prove that the combine is, maybe too much is made of what happened for him at the combine, and he's a better receiver.
I actually think now, Andy, Kelvin Harmon's at a very reasonable price in dynasty leagues. In the early mock drafts that I've been doing, I've been able to get him at pick number 29, 30, 33 one time. So I still think there's value there, and I'm always going to chase value and upside. I mean, his film work is great, his production is great, and I think in the long run he will prove most of these NFL teams wrong. I do like him at value still. I'm still investing in him.
Well, I'm happy that combined he was able to sneak into our top 25. So he's still there on the first page of our big board. But I don't want to take forever with this episode. So, we'll try to keep it relatively quick going through the next 26 to 50. Jalen Hurd, Raquel Armstead, a lot of people are loving this situation for him. Kind of like the Mecole Hardman plug and play substitution for Tyreek Hill. People are seeing that for Raquel Armstead landing in Jacksonville as, Leonard Fournette, your days are numbered with the Jags, and Armstead's just going to move right in. I don't necessarily think that's the case, though. But we'll have to see. People are saying they have a similar running style. I don't think so. I think that's doing an incredible disservice to what Leonard Fournette was entering the league. This was one of the best running backs we've seen in quite some time. So I don't think Raquel Armstead is nearly of the same pedigree. Now, what you can say between the ears, sure, go for it. But what they actually are physically is two different types of styles and runners, although they do it with strength, and that's where they like to win. But Justice Hill, great opportunity for him landing in Baltimore, especially because he's kind of that dynamic change of what they have with the thumpers up front with Gus Edwards and one of my favorites going back the last couple of years in Alex Collins. But Gary Jennings, we mentioned him a moment ago. Jay Sternberger, one of both of our favorite tight ends and sleeper tight ends. I think he gets a nice situation for himself. I'm going to touch on another tight end in a moment, but Bryce Love going to be at least a year away, but definitely a nice fit for Washington to maybe take over in that Chris Thompson role. Darwin Thompson, we touched on a moment ago. He gets the draft capital with being able to maybe take over the running back committee in Kansas City. Dexter Williams trending in the right direction, moves to Green Bay. Nothing really, standing in his way. I know, there's the love for Aaron Jones and everything like that, but, Dexter Williams has an opportunity to get some touches right away. Benny Snell, same thing. He's going to be behind James Conner, obviously, but he could be that goal line situational short yardage piece for the Steelers. Keyshawn Johnson going to be buried on the depth chart, but has some sneaky skills. So don't underestimate the Fresno State product landing in Arizona. Alexander Madison, one of your guys. A lot of people liked him. I want to touch on Myles Gaskin, though, real quick. I think he's vastly underrated. I think Miami's trying to change the narrative and change the script going down in South Florida. And Myles Gaskin, to me, is a much better between the tackles runner than we've probably give him credit for. He's been very durable, over 200 carries in each of his 4 seasons at Washington, a good receiver out of the backfield. I think he has a legit shot to come in and take away the RB1 role in Miami as they, shift their offense with Josh Rosen coming in as well. Riley Ridley we touched on, Travion Williams, a little underrated and slept on, but I tweeted out recently, 70% of the SEC leading rushers have had success in the NFL, and that was what Travion Williams was in 2018, the SEC's leading rusher. Daniel Jones, maybe the biggest laughing moment of the 2019 draft with, him winding up in New York. But I wanted to ask you about Kahale Warring. I kind of likened him to a love child of Rico Gathers and Mike Gesicki for me. He goes to Houston, which has been seemingly trying to find a tight end of the future more than Baltimore has. So, John, what do you think of Kahale Warring and his upside as a pro?
I love this landing spot, Andy. I mean, Texans are desperate for production at the tight end position. So I think, he's going to see a lot of one-on-one opportunities if he makes it and he learns the system for Houston, Coach Bill Bryan, and he has, Deshaun Watson throwing the football. And defenses are not going to pay attention to him when you have Will Fuller, DeAndre Hopkins, and all the weapons on the field. So I like him here. I think he's a deep sleeper. Hey, he's in our top 44, so we like this guy a lot. He's someone you have to keep your eye out on.
Yeah, I was very surprised with the glaring need for offensive line help. They didn't attack that more, but Kahale Warren gives them another nice chess piece, if you will, in that offense, and somebody that can do some blocking at the line as well. Rodney Anderson, the ultimate lottery ticket in this entire dynasty draft. We have him down at 42 collectively. He could be the best running back in this class if he can stay healthy and put it all together, and he slips dramatically and now winds up in a crowded Bengals backfield all of a sudden. But don't rule out Rodney Anderson as well. Drew Lock gets to Denver somehow, not at 10 where we thought in the first round, but does wind up there. Mike Weber, however you want to pronounce it, I've heard both, lands in Dallas, as does the next player on our list, Tony Pollard, who seems to be more of a special teams desire for Dallas than what people are thinking maybe at the running back position. But regardless, they're both going to be behind Zeke. Josh Oliver, another surprising pick of the draft, a good potential upside as a receiving tight end, but somebody that still needs to harness a lot more of his game at the position, especially from the blocking department. James Williams, both somebody we love. I think he's got a great opportunity in that Kansas City backfield. I really think James Williams is going to surprise a lot of people. Stanley Morgan at 49. Drew Sample was a surprise for some at 50, but I think he's a better offensive weapon than just a blocker. And I say 48 because I wanted you to finish this one. Will Grier, one of your favorite quarterbacks in this class. Cam Newton is not 100% healthy. Will Grier has a legit shot to step into this Panthers offense right away as a rookie. So is Will Grier somebody people should be paying more attention to in your mind?
Absolutely. I'm going to try to take him in all my dynasty leagues in the 4th round because you know what, Andy, you just said it. We don't really know the extent of Cam Newton's injury. I don't think the Panthers were really honest with us at the end of last year. Remember, we kind of had this cloud over Andrew Luck in the 2016 to 2017 offseason, and then sure enough, Andrew Luck missed the entire season. I'm not a doctor, but it doesn't seem very good. I think there's a chance that Will Grier gets on the field sooner than later in the next 2 seasons in Carolina. So I'm very fascinating to see him land in this spot and see what happens with him. Hey, I want Cam Newton to play. Great fantasy asset, so much fun to watch. But, we really don't know the extent of this injury, and they're not telling us a lot.
All right, well, that is our top 50. I'm going to give you one last pick, and then I'm going to ask John for one as well. I'm not really a huge fan of his, but I know the metrics world, the athletic world, a lot of draftniks love tight end Dawson Knox. Listen, Buffalo had a huge gaping hole for a tight end, especially when you consider how their season ended with Charles Clay dropping a touchdown that might have extended their season. So I think Dawson Knox has the potential to walk into a situation and be a folk hero in Buffalo. He's somebody that barely missed our top 50, but I think has a lot of upside. So if you're looking for a later, kind of lottery pick, as I mentioned, Rodney Anderson is one of those for me as well. I think Dawson Knox is somebody maybe I'd reach up a little bit for to make sure I secured him just because of what the potential could be, especially at a position that really hasn't had too much consistency the last couple of years. John, do you have one person that maybe didn't make our top 50 or was at the back end of our top 50 that you think you're going to try to acquire more times than not?
I'm going to give you 2. Our first one is Emmanuel Hall of the Chicago Bears. I had him in my top 12. He's a little bit of a one-hit wonder, kind of like McCole Hardman, incredible 40-time home run hitter, deep threat. So I like him. But the one who's going to absolutely, you might even be able to pick him off the waiver wire, Bruce Anderson, the running back from North Dakota State, ended up with Bruce Arians in Tampa Bay. Hey, they have Ronald Jones as the sophomore in that backfield, and then they have Peyton Barber. Look, neither of those 2 guys are guaranteed to be rock-solid studs for the Buccaneers. I'm very interested in Bruce Anderson. I like him as a deep sleeper. Landing in Tampa Bay is a pretty sneaky spot. So we got to watch Bruce Anderson develop throughout training camp and see what his role will be with the Buccaneers.
All right, well, that's going to do it. Of course, there are a lot of names we didn't mention, so if you have more questions on certain guys that maybe you'd like to hear us talk about, or guys that we did go over, but maybe not to the extent you wanted, hit us up on Twitter. John's at GridironSkyle91, and I'm, of course, at People's Pen. Leave it in the comments below. We'd be happy to answer there as well. Don't forget to also check out Dynasty League Football throughout the year for updated rankings, podcasts, and weekly articles, sure to give you all the content you need. John's written work can also be found on footballdiehards.com, and we're around all season, so don't be shy. Hit us up, leave it in the comments below, subscribe to the channel. We'll be trying to drop here new videos here and there. John wants to do some Devy stuff. You can go check out my newly launched website, expandtheboxscore.com, where we're detailing every touch for every player in Division I throughout the season. So make sure you go and subscribe to that. It's only $10 for a full year subscription. And anything else you got, hopefully this episode wasn't too long. Hopefully you got something out of it. Don't forget, we can be found in podcast formats as well. Just search my name, Andy Singleton, no spaces, and it'll come up. Everything we've done is in an audio version as well on every major podcast platform. So go check us out there as well. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sticking with us. We appreciate everybody who's been watching all these videos. We thank you tremendously, and I hope you got something out of it. Thanks for tuning in today.